What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix for Week 6 of the 2021 CFL season. I'm Ryan Coop here, kicking things off for Week 6 with the look at the quarterbacks available this week. It should be an interesting week of CFL Fantasy. We've got 3 rematches from the week before, which bring a little extra intrigue. Do you go with the guys who had great weeks the week before and expect them to do the same thing again? Do you bank on a guy who had a bit of a down performance, getting a bit of a bounce back this week, perhaps more targets, with the focus being on the ones who did well the week before? It should be an interesting week, and as always, it brings a couple interesting fantasy options at each position. Let's take a look at the quarterbacks here. Again, some in the green light category, some I have in the yellow light category, some in the red light category. And it's largely based around what I call the valuable production model. Essentially boils down to 2.5 points per $1,000 you spend gets you to a 100-point week. So you can see the number of points you'd need to hit different points per $1,000 for each player here based on their salary. So let's start with the options I like, and it starts off with Trevor Harris in Edmonton. Salary comes in at $11,047. He's been averaging 17.8 on the year, had a big 33.3 point performance against this Calgary defense last week, which was finally, that offense saw some life. Finally, they managed to get the ball in the end zone. In fact, Harris threw 4 touchdowns in that game. I like Harris again this week because I think, of any quarterback who can put you up that 30-point total, I think I put Harris as one of the top options to do so on any given week. He has the floor of those 300-yard passing games consistently. That's going to give you, 12 points in that regard if he holds onto the ball. And I think you add a couple touchdowns if that offense has gotten back on track. That puts you up at a nice point range. I think he can hit that 27.6 potentially. I feel confident he can put you up at least a 20-point week this week, especially against the Calgary defense. It's just been awful against the pass this year, giving up by far the biggest total against quarterbacks this year, outside of, just ahead of Ottawa, I guess. And speaking of Ottawa, the matchup with them makes me really like Michael Riley as a quarterback this week at 10,410. He put up 24 points on them just 2 weeks ago. So we already have that baseline to go off of. Ottawa's defense gave up a big 31-point performance to Vernon Adams Jr. last week as well. So it's been a couple weeks in a row, especially since they lost Sherrod Baltimore and Abdul Kanay in the defensive backfield, that Ottawa's defense is proving that you can pass really well against them right now. And I like Riley. I like that BC offense. Burnham, Whitehead, all of those options available to him. I like the floor here to put up 20 points at least. That's going to give you the decent, pretty solid value. And to get the full value out of him, you need 26. And Riley has always proven to be that kind of quarterback that can put you up a big point total. Especially, he likes to run with the ball a little bit as well. And he likes to, we sometimes get those 1-yard rushing touchdowns out of Riley as well. That certainly help his point totals. The other starter I like is Dane Evans in Hamilton. He should get the start for the 3rd week in a row. He's got that team rolling on 2 straight victories. And he's put up 2 pretty solid performances, hovering around the 17 to 19 point mark in 2 straight games. 18.3 is his average over that span. He put up, I think, 18.9 against Toronto last week, the same team he's facing again this time around. And, Evans is that kind of guy that he's got you those decent performances each and every week. I think that offense is only going to get more consistent as the season goes along, especially if, Brandon Banks is back in the lineup and actually, they finally get him that breakout game we've been waiting to see all year. I think Evans is a guy that showed in 2019 he has the potential to put up that 25.7 point week you need. So I like Dane Evans. Bit disappointed that his salary rose to what it is. Makes sense that it does so. If he was in that $9,000 mark, I would have liked Evans a little bit more, but I think he can still cover this point total. The two starters I have in the yellow light category, Zach Collaros' dollar value has dropped tremendously, almost $2,000, if not more, from what it was last week, which makes him a more intriguing play this time around. You need 20.2 to get the full 2.5 points per $1,000 from him. He has not hit the 20-point mark once this year. He's hit 19, I believe, is his highest. He hasn't had a 300-yard passing game. So a lot of his point totals are touchdown dependent. He's got his average on the year is 15.2. He put up around 14 points against the Riders the week before, who he faces again this time around. And so I like Collaros. I think he's consistently going to get you close to that 2 points per $1,000 mark. But he has not hit, the reason I'm cautious is he has not hit that 2.5 times threshold once yet this year. And I think the Riders are also going to have a good bounce back day this week. They shut the Bombers offense down pretty well for the most part in the Labor Day Classic. But I expect the Riders offense to be back on track a little bit more, and maybe that gives their defense a little bit more room to perform as well. So I'm cautious on Collaros because I don't think the ceiling is as high as it is for some of the other guys I've mentioned already. But I think you've got a pretty decent floor there that could make him a good play at a cheaper salary. Speaking of cheaper salaries, it's the cheapest quarterback, starting quarterback in the game. Yes, Dominic Davis should be getting the start this week after coming in the second quarter against Montreal last week and putting up a fine day, 25.4 points in just 3 quarters of play, which actually is more than Matt Nichols has put up on the entire season through 13 quarters for him. So Davis bringing some life to that Red Blacks offense, which is great to see them finally get things going a little bit. He put up 25.4 last week. You need just 15.7, which is very manageable to get the full value out of him this week. And I like him in that regard because he's a guy that gets involved in the run game. You know, he's going to get you some rushing yards. He's going to get you potentially a rushing touchdown of punching the ball in. That gives you 6 points right there. So, you know, if he gets things going a little bit in the passing game, I like Davis to cover the value you need. The only reason I don't have him in the green light category is because he's facing a BC defense that has the lowest average against quarterbacks all season. They had big days, you know, picking off Bo Levi Mitchell in week number 2 or 3 with 4 interceptions. That was a great day there. That really hurt your quarterback total. They had a great day against Ottawa 2 weeks ago when Matt Nichols was the starter. So Davis being a guy that I think does provide a spark on offense, but also struggles with throwing interceptions here and there. I could see him having a day where he throws 2 or 3 picks along with, you know, 1 or 2 touchdowns. So I put him in the cautious category because I'm not 100% convinced he gets you the value you need, but I'm very close to putting him in the green light because I think his rushing prowess certainly helps you a ton in that regard of getting the value you need. The guys I'm putting in the red light category, it's Cody Fajardo of the Riders, $12,683. Look, you need 31.7 points, which is a really high total to get the full value you need out of Cody Fajardo. And last week he had a dismal day against the Bombers, put up 4.5 points, threw 3 interceptions, had his least efficient day of the year. Facing arguably the best pass rush they've faced so far, the best defense they've faced so far this year. And so I'm putting him in the red light category because if he puts up another day like he did against the Bombers last week, that's a disaster for your fantasy team if you're spending that much money on him. And even if he gets back on track, which I think he will, and is some room to pass, normally against the Bombers defense, they can give up a ton of yards. They showed that against Toronto and Calgary in back-to-back weeks, but they haven't given up a lot of touchdowns, really. Just 11.4 points against the Bombers' defense gives up to quarterbacks, so they don't give up a ton to the QBs. Even if Fajardo gets the passing yards on track, I'm not convinced he puts you up, say, a 4-touchdown day to get you that 31.7 points. I think 25.4 may even be tough for him to hit. So I have him probably clocking in somewhere between the 1 point per $1,000 or the 1.5 range this week, which is just not worth it if you're spending that kind of salary. I'm staying away from Nick Arbuckle this week. $10,269. His salary rose from what it was the week before, but he had a bit of a down day, 8.8 points only against the same Ticats defense he faces again. The Ticats seem to have turned a corner both offensively and defensively, which makes me a bit worried to see how Arbuckle bounces back this week. I also have him in this category just because I'm not convinced that fully convinced quite yet that he starts this week after McLeod Bethel-Thompson came in and had himself a solid day in the little bit of time he played. I do think Arbuckle starts. I'm pretty confident in that regard, that they'll give him another week and that he could have a bounce back here. Because I think you have to, go for consistency and get things going. And Labor Day is always a tough game against Ticats for the Argos. But I'm not convinced, again, the matchup with Hamilton, after what we saw from him last week, I think 25.7 points is going to be tough for Nick Arbuckle to hit this week. I think he hits, as a ceiling, probably somewhere in that 15 to 20 point range. Which may get you decent value on the week, but with the salary rising and putting him in that same salary price point at pretty much as Riley or Evans, I like those two guys a lot more than I like Arbuckle. I'm also staying away from Bo Levi Mitchell if he starts. He was a full participant in practice for 2 days last week, but did not get the start against Edmonton. Perhaps he's ready to go this week. We'll continue to have to monitor that as the week goes along. I put him in the red-white category just because in the 2 games he played, we did not see the Bo Levi Mitchell we're used to seeing. Granted, he played the second one on a broken fibula, which is nuts. But I want to see how he performs coming out of this injury before I risk slotting him in my lineup. If he gets back to the form we've seen from him in the past, 25 fantasy points should be no problem for him. But that all needs to come through the air because he doesn't run the ball, especially coming off a broken leg. I don't expect him to run the ball. And I don't know if we haven't seen fantasy performances like that from Calgary's offense yet this year, especially facing an Edmonton team that's done decently well against quarterbacks this season. So I stay away from Bo Levi Mitchell if he does get the start at that price point. I want to see how he comes out of that injury before going any further. Taking a look at the backups this week as well, if there's any potential options there. Look, I really like Jake Maier if he gets the start and Bo's not ready to go. He comes in cheap at $72.08 is his salary. He's averaging 14.1 points through 3 games. He's had 3 straight 300-yard passing games to start his career. And has a couple of times where I think he would have had a higher total too. He had some end zone looks that just didn't go their way. Receivers dropping balls certainly didn't help in that regard. He's been a pretty accurate passer in those 3 games, and he is facing that Edmonton defense. That's a tough matchup. But look, he's averaging 14.1, so he's really close to getting you that 2 points per $1,000 ratio. And I think 18 fantasy points is very doable if he adds a couple touchdowns to those 300 yards. So I like Jake Maier too. If he starts, big if on that, cover that value play for you this week against Edmonton. I think Calgary is going to bounce back, hopefully, for their regard, because I think it's a must win for them this week. Just keep pace in the standings. I never thought I'd say that about Calgary. So if he starts, I like Maier at the value play. A couple other guys, McLeod Bethel-Thompson, I'm staying away from him. Even if he starts this week, I don't like that matchup against this Ticats defense based on how things went the week before. And Matt Nichols, I am staying away from him in CFL Fantasy probably all season long. Negative 1.1 points before getting pulled last week. In the event he starts, which I don't think he does, I don't think he puts you up nearly enough points against the tough BC defense. So those are the options at quarterback for week number 6. A couple I really like, namely Trevor Harris, Michael Riley, and Dane Evans. A couple I'm caught, and Jake Mayer if he starts. A couple I'm cautious on, Zach Collaros, Dominic Davis, and then staying away from Cody Fajardo, Nick Arbuckle, Bo Levi Mitchell, McLeod Bethel Thompson, and Matt Nichols. That does it for the week 6 quarterback preview. Stay tuned later today. I'll also have your running backs, and tomorrow I'll have the wide receivers and defenses as well. Do all the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't. If you have any fantasy questions, put them in the comments section. Tweet them at me at CooperTrooper42. Always happy to talk CFL Fantasy with anybody who wants to. And yeah, thanks as always for watching. Always appreciate it. Take care, and I'll talk to you in the running back preview later today. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.